Colleagues, God gives food to the birds but never throws worms in their nests. So colleagues, in this video, let's just discuss one-on-one how this listening IELTS is done. We shall first start and then after that we shall review it together. Members, so let's get started.
The IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.
First, you have some time to read through questions 21 to 25 about the history of the tomato here in the United States.
In the United States, tomatoes were also used as ornamental plants rather than as food for a long time. This attitude began to change in the 1800s. In 1806, a gardener's calendar mentioned that tomatoes could be used to improve the flavor of soups and other foods. Thomas Jefferson did much to enhance the tomato's reputation as a food. He first served tomatoes to visitors at his home in Virginia in 1809. Then in 1820, a man named Robert Gibbon Johnson decided it was time to discard once and for all the idea that tomatoes were poisonous. To prove his point, he ate 1 kilo of ripe red tomatoes in public. 2,000 people gathered to watch this feat, which took place on the steps of the courthouse in Salem, Massachusetts. Amazingly enough, Johnson survived this stunt. The popularity of the tomato as a food began growing rapidly. Soon people all around the country were eating tomatoes. By the 1830s, American newspapers and magazines were publishing thousands of tomato recipes. However, all those recipes involved using tomatoes in some cooked form. Tomato salads and sandwiches were still unknown. It wasn't until a century later, in the 1930s, that it became popular for people to eat raw tomatoes.
Time to read through questions 21 to 25 about the history of the tomato here in the United States. Now let's review it together. So members, the first step you need to take is to first get the overall meaning or title of the audio. So this audio will be about the history of the tomato in the US. So and then thereby you go ahead and you underline the instruction, which is only one word. Not number, no what, but only one word. Yes, very important. And then you go ahead and you underline the keywords. Here we have in 1906, so you have to go following the years 06, 09. Sometimes they can say 3 years later. So you have to really take note of that. And then you go ahead and you look at the prepositions. Here they say tomatoes were mentioned as food in a something. So there should be a noun that will take up a something. Is it a word? Is it a basket? Anything. Then here they say Thomas Jefferson dash tomatoes, and then meaning this is more like of a noun. These tomatoes. So just go ahead underlining the keywords by eating them in a. The last words before the space. So now let's begin with the audio.
In the United States, tomatoes were also used as ornamental plants rather than as food for a long time. This attitude began to change in the 1800s. In 1806, a gardener's calendar mentioned that tomatoes could be used to improve the flavor of soups and other foods.
So here they said, you've heard their statement right. Something, for that food was mentioned in on a something. So what do you guys think? So as the audio is being played, you have to really make notes. And here the answer was that food was. So here the answer was that tomatoes were mentioned as food in a calendar. So just go on making notes as the audio audio plays. So let's go ahead.
Thomas Jefferson did much to enhance the tomato's reputation as a food. He first served tomatoes to visitors at his home in Virginia in 1809.
Have you heard that? They've said that Thomas Jefferson did dash to tomatoes in Virginia, so there was some verb there, so it was served. You can just go ahead and forth and play the audio slowly, but that was the answer, served. Before he went ahead and talked of another year, 1820. So let's go ahead.
Then in 1820, a man named Robert Gibbon Johnson decided it was time to discard once and for all the idea that tomatoes were poisonous. To prove his point, he ate 1 kilo of ripe red tomatoes in public. 2,000 people gathered to watch this feat, which took place on the steps of the courthouse in Salem, Massachusetts.
So here they said that he wanted to prove that tomatoes were not poisonous by eating them in public. Just need to just put there public, and then you wait for something else. So don't just leave it because you might forget it.
Amazingly enough, Johnson survived this stunt. The popularity of the tomato as a food began growing rapidly. Soon people all around the country were eating tomatoes. By the 1830s, America...
So here they say 1830. What's going to happen in 1830? Tomato dash appeared in newspapers and magazines. Something that's attached to tomato watch. Tomatoes popularity, tomatoes what? So let's wait and see.
Newspapers and magazines were publishing thousands of tomato recipes. However, all those recipes involved
tomato recipes. Tomato recipes. Let's go ahead, members.
Using tomatoes in some cooked form. Tomato salads and sandwiches were still unknown. It wasn't until a century later, in the 1930s, that it became popular for people to eat raw tomatoes.
Have you heard, guys? It wasn't until a century later. So a century is 100 years. So you catch it in your mind that 100 years, had they said a decade, it would have been plus 10, but now it's 100. So 1830 plus 100, that's 1930. So you have just be patient and see. People began to eat something, tomatoes. So it's an adjective, a descriptive word. Began to eat yellow tomatoes. Is it a color? Something to describe tomatoes. So let's wait and see.
Popular for people to eat raw tomatoes.
Raw. Have you heard it? Raw tomatoes. But you keep on listening. Write it down, but you keep listening. You never know, they might change it. You know, it's listening. Sounds, it's the end. Now attempt the following 3 tests and answers will be at the end.
Now turn to part 1. Part 1.
You will hear a woman booking a bicycle tour over the phone. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Global Bicycle Tours. May I help you?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to sign up for a bicycle tour.
Which tour were you interested in? We have the River Valley Tour coming up in June and the Mountain Tour in July.
The River Valley tour is in June. I thought it was in May.
It actually takes place the first week of June.
Oh, I see. Well, I can still do that. The River Valley tour is the one I want.
Splendid. Just let me take your information. May I have your name, please?
Carla Schmidt. That's Carla with a K, not a C. Karla.
Thank you, Miss Schmidt. Address?
Do you need a street address, or can I give you my post office box?
A post office box is fine.
It's P.O. Box 257, Manchester.
Thank you. Okay, next. Will you be bringing your own bicycle, or do you want to rent one from us?
I'll bring my own.
Excellent. Now, we provide all the meals, so we need to know if you have any dietary restrictions.
I don't think so. What do you mean?
I mean, if there's any food you can't eat. Some people have food allergies or are vegetarian or have to avoid dairy products, things like that.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, I'm a vegetarian. I never eat meat.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to
look at questions 5 to 9.
listen and answer questions
5 to 9.
Could you give us a little background of the museum? I mean, when it was built and some information about the collections and things like that?
Of course. The main part of the museum was built in 1895 with a combination of public and private funds. The new wing was built 60 years later with a donation from the Rhinebeck family.
That part of the museum was built for the modern art collection, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. In the main part of the museum, we have a gallery devoted to works by local artists, our sculpture collection, and a small collection of classical European art.
You mentioned classes earlier. What kinds of classes does the museum offer?
In our adult education program, we offer a series of art history classes. And for children, we have a program of arts and crafts workshops. You can get a brochure from the office that will give you more information.
I saw a lot of chairs set up in the main hall. What are those for?
Those are there for tonight's musical performance. We offer a weekly concert series during the fall and winter. And of course, all of you are welcome to attend. Now, if there are no more questions, let's step into my office and I'll show you your schedules.
Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a first aid officer talking to a group of factory workers about emergency first aid. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Hello everyone. Now, you know why I'm here. You all work in a factory, and in this environment, there always remains a significant possibility of accidents happening, in which case first aid will be necessary. What is first aid? It is the provision of emergency on-site care when an injury occurs, and it is essential for everyone to know, if only simply, the steps which must be followed. There are, of course, minor injuries which may happen, not needing further medical care beyond the intervention of the first aider, but you can never be sure. Thus, the following steps must always be followed. These can be abbreviated to the words Dr. A, B, C. In other words, D, R, A, B, C. The D stands for danger, and that's the first issue to keep in mind. When an accident happens, immediately ascertain that the environment is safe. That, for example, nothing else will fall or break or cause accidents. If you, the first aider, are also injured, the problem is even worse. The R stands for respond. You must then ascertain the best response. Once all the danger has been eliminated and the distress calls sent out, the appropriate action is, obviously, to help the injured party. Alright, that leads to A, which stands for airway. In order to stay alive, all people need to have an open airway to allow breathing. A conscious person will automatically clear their own airway. But if unconscious, this may not happen. The brain is stopped or hindered from properly directing the body, and, obviously, in the worst case, death can result. For this reason, the injured person is normally put into the recovery position. Placed on the side, tilting the head back and ensuring that there are no blockages in the mouth. To free any such blockages, the back can be slapped or the chest compressed, allowing anything to be spat out. Now that the airway is free, check for B, or breathing. If breathing is not happening or is irregular, the first aider may have to assist with what is technically known as cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or more commonly, CPR. This involves breathing for the patient through mouth-to-mouth contact, while periodically massaging the heart through compressions to the chest. This combination allows blood and oxygen to flow around the body, keeping the patient alive, hopefully until medics, such as doctors, advanced first aiders or ambulance staff arrive.
Before you hear the rest of the talk,